Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS College Football Week 14. We got a Friday slate as well as a Saturday slate. Gonna get through as many games as I can. It's just gonna be a few. It's Thanksgiving weekend. I'm short-staffed here. We'll go through all the games on the live stream, which is Friday morning at 11 a.m. But as for this video, I just picked a few of the most popular games on the board. Gonna run through those. Let's do it.
Welcome to the SWUS. The SWUS. SWUS. Hey, get the SWUS.
Oklahoma State on the road at Colorado to play the Buffs. Colorado laying 16.5 points at home. Total sitting at 65.5 for this one. And if you've watched any Oklahoma State football this year, you know 65.5 sounds about right. Team does not play a lot of defense, so it makes sense. Let's get into this one. We'll start with the Oklahoma State offense against the Colorado defense. And honestly, this is where we actually have a matchup. On the other side, the Colorado offense against the Oklahoma State defense, we don't have to talk about. I mean, Colorado's going to score a lot of points. Oklahoma State can't stop anybody. But on this side, Oklahoma State can actually compete. This offense isn't bad at all. They're 44th in yards per play, 64th in success rate. Unfortunately, the run game with Ollie Gordon has not been working this year. 88th in yards per carry, 92nd in success rate per rush. But they can throw the ball. This team does have a passing attack. 51st in yards per pass attempt, 40th in success rate per dropback. This offense is sitting at 42nd in OFEI. This is not a bad offense at all. And I can't really explain it, but for some reason, this Oklahoma State offense functions better on the road. I don't know if there's really anything to take away from this. I thought it was interesting. Look at the efficiency numbers. 47% success rate on the road, 6.2 yards per play on the road, both significantly better than their numbers at home. So Oklahoma State, an offense not scared to go on the road. Remember, this is an offense that went on the road into BYU. They were catching 10.5 points. Everyone thought they were going to get smoked. They put up 35 points and should have won the game. BYU scored a touchdown with 11 seconds left to win. So we know this offense can go on the road and put up points. And I know a lot of people might be thinking that this Oklahoma State team just quit on Mike Gundy. Well, last week against Texas Tech was probably their best offensive game of the year. They had nothing to play for. They've been mathematically eliminated. Put up 48 points in the game, over 8.5 yards per play, 51.5% success rate. So this team has not quit. And what you really love to see if you're an Oklahoma State fan is they finally got the run game going. Ollie Gordon finally had himself a huge game, 156 yards, 3 touchdowns, 10.4 yards per carry. They were throwing the ball, they were running the ball. This offense looked as good in that game as they had in any point in the season. So this team has definitely not quit. Now, we do have to give Colorado some credit. They've played some tough defense. Last week against Kansas, not so much. They gave up 37 points, 6.87 yards per play, over 53% success rate. Kansas kind of did whatever they wanted. In the previous 4 games before that, they had been playing really good defense, though. I will say, this Oklahoma State offense is dangerous, though, and you got Utah in there, you got Arizona. Cincinnati's offense kind of died. So maybe this Oklahoma State offense is a tough test for Colorado. I think they're going to score points, honestly. But when we flip it over to the other side, I mean, like I said before, it's not even a discussion. This Colorado offense should score literally 1 billion points on Oklahoma State. It's one of the best passing attacks in the country. And like I said before, Oklahoma State cannot stop anything. Can't stop anything on the ground, can't stop anything through the air. They're 129th in the country in yards per play allowed, 106th in success rate. This defense straight up sucks. I guess if you are trying to back Oklahoma State here, if you're trying to take the 16.5, I guess you can point at the pass rush. Oklahoma State's defense is terrible, but if you point to one aspect of the defense that's somewhat decent, it would be the pass rush. They're 56th in pressure rate, 77th in sack rate, and I know those numbers aren't good, but compared to the rest of their defensive metrics, that's actually pretty good. So they do have something that resembles a pass rush, but I mean, Shedeur Sanders has done a lot better job this year handling pressure. That's not enough to stop this Colorado offense. Shedeur Sanders should have no problems making throws. Colorado should definitely put up a big number on the scoreboard in this one. I mean, look at Oklahoma State's numbers against the pass in their last 7 games. 9.13 yards per attempt, 48.8% success rate per dropback. I have no confidence in this Oklahoma State defense making stops against Colorado. So the Buffs are going to score points here. The question is, can Oklahoma State go punch for punch with them? And the answer to that question is probably not. I mean, Colorado is still mathematically alive in the Big 12 championship. They need a lot of help to make it into the championship game, but they are still playing for something. I really can't see Oklahoma State pulling this one off. I do think they're going to score, though. So instead of laying the 16.5, I would put this at around 14. So I guess at 16.5, I'd slightly lean towards Oklahoma State. But honestly, I'd probably just bet the over, have some fun here. Haven't personally bet it, but I wouldn't be surprised if I put a few dollars on the over here. So let's say over 65 next game. Minnesota's on the road in Madison for this one. Wisconsin's laying 1.5 points at home. Total sitting at 41.5. Start with some head-to-head history. These two are 2-2 in their last 4 matchups. Minnesota's 3-1 against the spread. So this rivalry's been pretty back and forth. We'll start with the Minnesota offense. They're 25th in passing frequency. As I'm sure you know, Minnesota is an offense that wants to throw the ball with Brosmer. And honestly, he's been surprisingly good this year. I have to admit, I was wrong. I was not expecting him to be this effective. I mean, after what Minnesota did last year with Kaliakmanis at quarterback, I didn't really expect much. This kid's an FCS transfer. Was not expecting a passing attack here from Minnesota, but he's really been all right. Not a ton of big downfield throws, but he protects the football. He moves the chains. He's really been all right. A little worried about the weather here in Madison. It's supposed to be windy, 15 miles an hour, 23 degrees. So cold and windy. Not too bad. I'm not saying they can't throw the ball. Not ideal conditions, though, for a pass-first offense. That's for sure. Honestly, the bigger concern for Max Brosmer in this game is the Wisconsin defense. They've been strong against the pass. Minnesota hasn't had much of a rushing attack this year. 102nd in yards per carry, 72nd in success rate per rush. This has been an offense that's reliant on the pass. Look at Wisconsin's defense against the pass this year. 40th in yards per pass attempt allowed, 63rd in success rate per dropback. This Wisconsin defense has been strong against the pass. Also, Max Brosmer has been much, much better at home in Minnesota. In his home games, 51.4% success rate per dropback, 7.9 yards per attempt. Those numbers dropped to 38.1% and 5.83 yards per attempt on the road. So he's been so much better in his home games. This game's on the road in Madison. And another thing that concerns me for Max Brosmer here is Wisconsin runs man coverage, 13th most in, I almost said in the NFL, 13th in man coverage frequency in the FBS. Max Brosmer's numbers much better against zone coverage. He struggled to throw the ball against man coverage. So this is looking like a pretty rough matchup for Max Brosmer here on the road against this Wisconsin defense. Now, I do have a couple angles I like for Max Brosmer. So if you plan on betting Minnesota, you're looking right here. Kind of looks like the Wisconsin defense may be falling apart a little bit against the pass. I mean, they got great numbers on the year. Last 4 games, 51.4% success rate per dropback, 7.98 yards per attempt. Yes, Penn State is in there, Oregon's in there, but also Iowa and Nebraska. I mean, Raiola just had a huge game against this Wisconsin defense. So the Wisconsin defense, excellent numbers against the pass on the full season, not so great in the last 4 games. It's kind of tough to call, though, because look at the 3 games before that. 3.97 yards per attempt. So the 3 games before those 4, they were lights out against the pass. Kind of puts us in a tough spot in terms of making a prediction. Another thing I like for Max Brosmer here is Wisconsin really hasn't had much of a pass rush this year. 63rd in pressure rate, 110th in sack rate. Minnesota's offensive line has been just okay. So Max Brosmer should have clean pockets to throw from in this game. Is that enough for me to trust him in this spot? In my opinion, not really. I also don't like how Minnesota probably not going to be able to give him run support. Like I said earlier, this hasn't been a great rushing attack this year. 3.53 yards per carry on the season, just 105 rushing yards per game. So on the road in the cold, in the wind against a Wisconsin defense that I think is pretty good without run support, I don't really like it for Max Brosmer. I think Wisconsin's defense bounces back after a really rough game against Nebraska. So I like the matchup for Wisconsin defensively. Now, what about the other side of the ball? We got the Wisconsin offense against the Minnesota defense. Now, at first glance, this looks like a very favorable matchup for Minnesota defensively. In my opinion, these 2 units are closer than this. Wisconsin's offense actually seems to be coming alive recently, specifically running the ball. We'll talk about it in a second. First, I want to talk about Braden Locke and the Wisconsin passing attack. So last week against Nebraska, Wisconsin got blown out. I should know. I had Wisconsin in the game. They got blown out. That being said, it was not Braden Locke's fault. It wasn't even the offense's fault. It was the defense's fault. If you look at Wisconsin's passing numbers in that game, they're fine. 292 yards through the air, 9.7 yards per attempt, 48.4% success rate per dropback. Braden Locke played a great game against Nebraska. Again, it was the defense that let them down. Now, you look at the right side of this graphic, and that may concern you, and I get it. In the previous 4 games before the Nebraska game, 5 yards per attempt, 29.8% success rate per dropback. Absolutely terrible passing numbers here from Braden Locke. That being said, look at the opponents. Oregon, Iowa, Penn State, even Northwestern has a great defense. That is the gauntlet there for Braden Locke. 4 elite defenses in a row. Last week, Braden Locke finally sees a defense that isn't elite. And by the way, Nebraska's defense is still pretty good. And we finally see him have a good game. So basically what I'm saying here is I don't think Braden Locke has gotten a fair shake as a starting quarterback. Keep in mind, he took over midway in the Alabama game. After that, he had a game against Rutgers. He played Purdue in there, and he played well in those games. Then he went through that absolute gauntlet of a schedule and didn't play too well. Last week, he played well against Nebraska. So personally, I think Braden Locke might have some potential. He's just been through the gauntlet in terms of tough defenses. And Minnesota's pass defense is not a unit I'd consider to be elite. They racked up all these nice looking numbers against some really bad offenses earlier in the season. Through their first 6 games, they were allowing 114 passing yards per game, 4.52 yards per attempt. Elite looking numbers. If you take a look at their opponents, it makes a lot of sense. North Carolina in the opener, that was the game Max Johnson got hurt. Rhode Island's an FCS program. Nevada, Iowa hasn't been able to throw the ball since the 80s. Michigan, they can't throw the ball at all this year. And then USC. So the first 6 games were such easy competition in terms of opposing quarterbacks. In their last 5 games, they've actually started to see some quarterbacks that can throw the ball. This pass defense doesn't look very good. 48% success rate per dropback, 7.68 yards per attempt, over 265 passing yards allowed per game. So I know if you look at the Minnesota numbers on the full season, it looks like they have some elite pass defense. I personally call bullshit on that. Another thing I like for Braden Locke here is he's seen so many elite pass rushes in the last month. This Minnesota defensive front is going to be a breath of fresh air for Braden Locke. 47th in pressure rate, 92nd in sack rate. Wisconsin's offensive line's been great in pass protection, so Braden Locke should have clean pockets to throw from in this game. And his splits are pretty clear. If you give him a clean pocket, he'll make the throws. If you put pressure on him, you definitely run into some problems. So Minnesota is not exactly a pass rush that scares me. I think Wisconsin's able to give Braden Locke clean pockets to throw from in this game. Now, in terms of run support, I know the Minnesota defense has been great against the run this year. We've seen them get run on twice, Iowa and USC, 6.1 yards per carry in those 2 games. Against everyone else, 3.11 yards per carry. So this is a very good run defense without a doubt. But honestly, and I was talking about this last week, this is starting to look like the old school Wisconsin offenses in a sense where they're running the ball on elite defenses. 4.31 yards per carry, 48.2% success rate per rush. That's in their last 3 games against Iowa, Oregon, Nebraska. Maybe not Nebraska, but the first 2. They're running the ball on these tough defenses. So honestly, Minnesota's run defense doesn't really scare me. At home in Madison, I think Wisconsin's going to be able to run the ball, which is why I bet the Badgers in this one. I got it at -1.5. It moved up to 2.5. I was feeling like the man. Now it's back to 1.5, and I even see 1s. So you can still get the 1.5. You could probably get a 1. Don't care. I'm on the Badgers. Wisconsin -1.5 is my bet. Next game. Navy is on the road at East Carolina. ECU laying 2.5. I do see a couple 3s out there, but mostly 2.5. Total sitting at 55.5 or 56. So let's get into this one, and we'll start with the Navy offense against the ECU defense. And at first glance, this is looking like a very favorable matchup for Navy. I mean, these are the numbers from the full season. Navy sitting at 33rd in OFEI. As we know, Navy runs the ball. They're 9th in yards per carry, 39th in success rate per rush, 7th in effective rush. Matched up against an ECU defense that's sitting at 52nd in yards per play, 31st in success rate. Numbers against the run are pretty solid. 54th in yards per carry, 10th in success rate per rush, but they're back at 95th in DFEI. So at first glance, this is looking like Navy should be able to move the ball on this ECU defense. But here's the thing. If you've been following Navy football this year, you know that this offense has fallen off a cliff. Through their first 5 games, they're averaging 43.6 points per game, success rate over 52%, over 7.7 yards per play. In their last 5 games, nothing close to that. Success rate has dropped below 40%, down to 26.5 points per game, 5.62 yards per play. This has not looked like the same offense at all recently for Navy. And this is a Navy offense that lives and dies by its ability to generate push with the offensive line. They have to generate push with the offensive line or that offense cannot function. Now, they've been pretty good at it. 39th in line yards, 16th in stuff rate, 19th in run blocking grade. But look at ECU's defensive front. 5th in line yards, 5th in stuff rate, 13th in run defense grade. Offensive lines have had a lot of problems generating push against ECU, so that is not a great look for Navy here. Not to mention, this East Carolina defense is always much better at home. That dates back multiple seasons. If you look at their season-long defensive numbers, it doesn't look like a great defense, but they're always so much better at home. On the road this year, they're allowing 34.7 points per game, 43.9% success rate, 5.67 yards per play. Look at their numbers at home. 18.4 points allowed per game, 30.1% success rate, 4.69 yards per play. We're talking a night and day difference. ECU's defense is much better at home, and it has been for multiple years. So even though when you look at the season-long numbers, it looks like Navy's offense should be able to score points on East Carolina, I mean, you take into consideration that this Navy offense seems to be trending in the wrong direction. ECU plays much tougher defense at home. I think they're going to struggle to move the ball. I think ECU should be fine defensively in this game. And on the other side, it's kind of the same story. You look at the season-long numbers, it looks like Navy's defense should have the advantage here. 66 in DFEI, solid numbers against the pass, 58th in yards per pass attempt allowed, 43rd in success rate per dropback. Matched up against an ECU defense that has some solid numbers, but schedule-adjusted numbers put them back a little further than that. 97th in effective rush, 68th in effective pass. But if you've been following East Carolina football this year, you know that this offense turned over a completely new leaf when they made the quarterback change over to Hauser since he took over the starting quarterback job. Night and day difference. In their first 6 games with Jake Garcia at quarterback, they were averaging 26.5 points per game, 40.4% success rate. Look at the last 5 games with Caden Hauser at quarterback. 42.2 points per game, success rate close to 50%, almost 7.5 yards per play. This East Carolina offense looks completely different since switching over to Caden Hauser, so I really don't know how this one is under 3, to be honest. I bet ECU at -2.5. I would imagine it's probably a bit square. Most people are probably going to be betting East Carolina. I don't care. ECU's been the much better team recently, and in my opinion, this number should be 4.5 even. So at 2.5, I love ECU. East Carolina -2.5 next game.
I thought I was going to have time tonight to go through some more. I just got home from my aunt's house for Thanksgiving dinner. So I'm just going to upload it with these 3. We'll go through all the games on the live show. And the 2 bets I gave out in this video are so... I placed them. I'm on Wisconsin and ECU, but I don't know what I'm missing about the market. I thought for sure ECU was going to close at 3, even maybe 3.5. I don't know what I'm missing there. And Wisconsin seems to be moving the other way. It's almost a pick now. So I don't know if I'm just missing something there. I do have a couple other bets. We'll go through it on the live show. That's at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So I'll see you there. See you in the morning.